So in this video, I'm gonna share with you some of the most unusual sales strategies and techniques you can use to explode your sales. Now, before we go ahead and get started, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And if you wanna take your sales game to the next level, make sure to check out my masterclass, Sales Legacy, at saleslegacy.com. Link is also in the description, and let's dive in. One of the more unusual sales strategies that I have for you today is to study other people and how they speak. When we're born or when we go through life, there's a certain way that we speak that is determined by who our parents are, where we live, how our friends speak, what area we're from. So for me, I'm from LA, I'm from California, right? So I'm gonna speak in a way where everyone around me speaks also the same way. But let's say you were born in Singapore, you're gonna have a certain accent, you have a certain sound, certain tonalities and things like that that work for Singapore, but maybe they don't sound as attractive when you're in different places around the world, right? I would say, like, for people, no matter where you are in the world, whether it's Singapore, China, Africa, South America, right? Understand that you can control the way you speak, you can control the way you sound, but in the beginning, you have to take inspiration from other people. The way I'm speaking right now isn't always how I spoke. I would say before, when I was younger, where I grew up, everyone was Asian, so there's a certain sound. It's like a very Asian American sound, actually. The first thing I did was record myself speak, right? And it's not as if back then, I wasn't doing sales. It was just like, hey, how do I sound? Do I sound good? Do I sound bad? Do I hate the way I speak? I would just record myself talk in a microphone, and I would just listen back. And at first, I absolutely hated it. It's just like, ooh, it's so cringe. The beginning is going to be terrible for you. If you've never done that before, I promise you it will be terrible. But after, a couple times doing it, you're going to get more used to it and more comfortable listening to yourself. Now, the second thing is you want to map out what you want to sound like. So for me, when I was younger, I listened to a lot of podcasts at the time. The Breakfast Club, which is kind of like hip hop podcasts where they interview like different artists and rappers, R&B singers, stuff like that, because I'm really into that music. And then they would just interview them and have fun, right? And so when I listen to these interviews, these people are coming from a different place from when I grew up, and then I'm just trying to understand, like, what sounds good, what sounds bad. Or I remember when I listened to it was Diplo, actually. Diplo had a very like manly, like low kind of voice.
For our biggest radio hit before we did Lean On was Bubble Butt.
That sounds pretty good. So it's like you take a combination of the people that you like the way they sound. It's not as if you're copying them. You're just taking these bits and elements and you're using your voice as an instrument to control how you want to sound, right? Just like a flute is, just like how a violin is. There are different strings to a violin, right? If you want to go high, you want to go low, you have this different range. Especially important when it comes to inflection. Sometimes I can speak softly, more slowly to create a different effect, or I can speak really fast and have more energy, right? All these things you can control. So pick out the people that you really like how they sound and see how you can borrow some of those things, take inspiration from it, and apply it to yourself. Because once you craft how you sound, you basically can control how people feel about you when they hear you. So what do I mean by that? Well, when you meet someone for the first time, how do they know whether they like you, to trust you? Usually they make that decision within, let's say, like 5 seconds. So for example, let's say you're a guy, you see a pretty girl, right? It only takes you like 5 seconds to decide whether or not you like this person, right? So it really comes down to two things. It's physical appearance and tonality. Physical appearance, obviously, you're born the way you're born, but you can present yourself in a certain way, like what you dress, your style, things like that. But we're not talking about physical appearance in this video. We're gonna be talking about tonality. When somebody looks at you, it's all about how you sound. How do you make them feel? And no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you were born with, no matter what culture you're from, understand that with enough work and effort, you can control the way you sound. And if you know certain sounds or certain inflections, tonalities, pacing, how fast you talk, how slow you talk, if you understand all these elements and variables and you understand how other people receive them, if you think about communication, you're just feeding someone information, right? So if you can control what goes into someone's mind when they have an idea about who you are, then you can basically control how somebody feels about you. So if you want to sound more confident, more competent, intellectual, or even, right, it's about how you sound, how you speak, the words you use, how you use those words, how fast you're talking, and these are all things that can be controlled. So in sales, a lot of times the game is confidence. It's your ability to ask hard questions, your ability to be okay with getting no's and moving on to the next person without feeling emotionally destroyed. There are certain things that I'm afraid to do, right? Especially when I was younger, like afraid to speak my mind, afraid to talk to this girl, afraid to do whatever, right? But it's okay to be afraid as long as you have the courage to overcome that fear and do the thing even though you know you are afraid, even though you are afraid of the consequences. So that's the first step, having the courage to do the thing that you're afraid to do. It's the second thing, you have to have some kind of system or some kind of place where you can constantly try over and over And if you fail, there's not a lot of consequences for that, right? So in sales, let's say you're cold calling, all that really means is how many cold calls are you doing per day? How many yeses are you getting? How many no's are you getting? And then if you're getting no, does that actually make a big negative impact in your life? Probably not. It probably doesn't matter at all, right? For me, how I developed the confidence even before I got into sales, honestly, was when I was in university. So in university, obviously, you're out and about, going to parties and this and that. You're talking to different people. For me, that was the most valuable thing. I mean, I did learn a lot in school from the books and the professors and things like that, but the real value really came from becoming more social, becoming more confident with myself, which actually is the most important thing, because all the technical things of how to do something, how to cold call, how to write a cold email, you can learn that online, right? It's just how to. But the main thing that I think really drove me to where I am today is really just having the social skills and having the confidence in myself to believe in myself enough to do something. And that really just comes down to like talking to people in class, saying hi to the person next to me, going to a party, talking to different people. And that's really all it is. You know, if you do that over and over and over and over, and then you keep putting yourself in different situations, then you start to expand your shell. You find more common ground with different type of people from different backgrounds, and then suddenly you become more confident, because in my personal opinion, fear comes from the unknown. So a lot of times when we are afraid of something, we're actually not afraid of the thing, we're afraid of what might happen. So we imagine the worst thing possible. Oh, if I call this person on the phone, what if they yell at me? What if they do this and that? What if my boss fires me? Whatever, right? A lot of times these illogical fears, it's so unlikely that they will happen that we become afraid of something that probably will never happen anyways. And so once you overcome that fear, meaning that you understand, if I do this thing, there's not actually that much risk, so why am I afraid? Then suddenly you have confidence. And that's where confidence comes from. It's like knowing what will happen. So if you call someone and you know exactly what will happen, if you say certain words and you know like 9 out of 10 times they will respond positively, what fear do you have? Let's say you're a guy, a lot of guys are afraid of talking to a girl, right? If you know they're gonna love you, they like your personality, everything, right? If you know that, you'd be talking to everyone because you know that 99% of the time, everyone's gonna love me anyways, right? That 1% doesn't matter. If that were the case, everybody would be talking to everybody, right? But because we don't know that percentage, we don't know, actually, we probably think that we're more likely to fail than succeed. That's why we're so afraid of the unknown. For example, if you just mastered cold calling, you knew every line, you've done it so many times that you already know what to expect, there's nothing to be afraid of. For me, fortunately, I've done enough calls and things like that to get to the point now. So when I'm on the phone doing a sales call and stuff like that, I'm not afraid of not being able to close. If they don't buy it, but I'm not afraid of them saying no, right? The next tip I have for you is quite unusual and maybe applies more to entrepreneurs, but if you want to generate more sales, networking actually is very important. Now, everyone will have a different opinion online. Some people will be like, oh, you don't need networking. You just need to stay at home, sit at your desk and just grind. Fair enough. You know, that definitely does work. But for different industries, different type of people, networking absolutely does help, right? So for my NFT advisory agency, which I started a couple of months ago, for me, how I've been able to close deals and get people to come to me inbound is really just networking. Is having like a good word of mouth, meaning that when I meet somebody, let's say an entrepreneur in the space, usually what I try to do is help them out for free, get them to interview on my show, my podcast, give them free advice, whatever it is. What ends up happening is that person is like, oh my God, like Patrick's legit. He helped me out. He didn't ask for anything. I'm going to say good things anytime anyone asks, right? And then they're going to tell their friend. And then that person is like, oh, that sounds like a pretty interesting person. Do you mind making an introduction so I can meet Patrick? And then that's pretty much how I build my network, right? So helping people for free is a huge thing because if you do it enough, it just keeps compounding over time. Now, when I meet someone, like, do I know that if I help them here, one day it's going to come back to me? I have no idea. What I do know is that, for one, I like helping people. So I just help. And then somehow, some way, it just always comes back. If you have a skill, a very hard skill that is very clear in how you solve someone's pain, that is value. So for example, a lot of people want my advice when it comes to like selling NFTs. So I will just give them my advice on selling NFTs, right? Or maybe they want more exposure to their project, their company. So I will have them on my podcast and just be like, hey, how about you come on the podcast and tell your story, right? And so those are the two main ways I drive a lot of value and get people to want to connect with me. And then eventually, like a lot of different types of people who are much more successful than me, they kind of want that advice or they want that exposure. They come to me, I help them out, and somehow we become friends, right? For you, just really think about like what you can help other people with. And when I was a salesperson, way back in the day, working at different companies, the way I provided value to different people was I would just share my sales experience, right? I would just be like, hey, at our company, this is how we do it. And they'll be like, oh, interesting. Let me take some notes. And that itself is value. So if you're watching this, you're probably in sales. Maybe you're learning from my videos. You can really just take what I teach on this channel, do it for yourself, find success, and then teach it to another person. And then you will be able to provide value to another person and help them sell and generate more sales for yourself. And so that is a tip for you. So with that said, that's everything we got to cover for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications notifications. And if you want to take your sales game to the next level, make sure to check out my masterclass, Sales Legacy. Link is in the description, and I will see you in the next one.